Have you ever avoided taking photos or wearing certain clothes because you don't like how your arms look? Put this mixture on your arms for 15 days and firm your skin. But pay very close attention to this, because the real secret is not only in the ingredients you are going to use, but in the way you apply them and in how they work inside the skin. And I will tell you that at the end of the video. Let's begin. I'm going to show you the first ingredient of this mixture, and pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because this oil alone is already powerful, but when used incorrectly, it cannot deliver its full potential. And that is exactly the mistake most people make. The first component is probably something you have already seen at a pharmacy, or maybe you even have it stored at home. I'm talking about castor oil. Yes, that thick and simple oil that many people know about, but very few truly understand how it works on mature skin. And pay attention to this, because although it may seem like a common oil, castor oil is one of the most studied oils in natural cosmetology. It comes from a plant called Ricinus communis and has a composition very different from other vegetable oils. In fact, nearly 90% of its composition is made up of a fatty acid called ricinoleic acid. And that is precisely where the secret behind much of its benefits lies. The first important effect of this oil is its anti-inflammatory capacity. And this is key for mature skin. As the years go by, the skin enters a state of constant, silent inflammation. Although many people do not notice it, that inflammation accelerates aging, increases sensitivity, and makes the skin more fragile and reactive. That is why mature skin often becomes easily irritated by the sun, the wind, or even gentle products. And this is where castor oil begins to make an important difference, because ricinoleic acid helps reduce irritation, redness, and that uncomfortable feeling of sensitive or altered skin. But that is not all. The second benefit of castor oil is its enormous moisturizing power. And when I say moisturizing, I do not mean just any superficial hydration. Castor oil acts as a humectant, which means it helps attract water into the skin and also helps retain that hydration for a longer time. And what happens then? The skin begins to feel softer, more flexible, and with a fuller and healthier appearance. That dry and wrinkled skin starts to look less dull because it regains part of the hydration it had lost over time. In addition, castor oil creates a kind of protective layer over the skin. And this is also very important, because as we age, the skin loses the ability to defend itself on its own. That is why any external aggression ends up affecting it more quickly. The wind dries it out more, the sun irritates it more, and even the weather can leave the skin rough. But that protective film formed by castor oil helps keep the skin much more protected against all those daily aggressions. Write the word skin in the comments if you are committed to taking care of it. All right, and there is still another point that almost nobody talks about. Castor oil also has antimicrobial properties, which means it helps protect the skin against microorganisms that can worsen irritation or inflammation. But perhaps the most important benefit for people over 50 or 60 years old is another one. Over time, the skin begins to constantly lose water. And when that happens, the skin becomes thinner, drier, and more aged. That process even has a technical name: transepidermal water loss. And what does castor oil do? It helps precisely to reduce that water loss, keeping the skin much more hydrated and protected. Now pay attention, because here comes the detail that almost nobody explains. Although castor oil has many benefits, it alone cannot completely transform the skin. Why? Because it is a very thick and heavy oil, so a large part of it stays more on the surface and cannot deeply penetrate the layers where collagen production occurs. And that is the problem. The skin feels soft on the outside, yes, but internally, many times a real change does not happen. That is why in this mixture, castor oil does not work alone. And this is where things start to become really interesting. When we combine it with another specific oil, the effect changes completely, because the second oil manages to do exactly what castor oil cannot achieve on its own. And believe me, this is where this mixture stops being only moisturizing and starts becoming a real strategy to improve the appearance of mature skin. Before I reveal it, subscribe and activate notifications to receive more videos like this. The second oil is rosehip oil. But forget that superficial idea many people have that rosehip is useful only for spots, because the reality is much more interesting than that. Rosehip oil is rich in essential fatty acids, especially linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid. And this changes everything when we talk about skincare. Do you know why? Because those fatty acids have much smaller molecules capable of penetrating deeply into the skin. Unlike castor oil, rosehip does not stay only on the surface. It manages to pass through several layers and reach exactly the regions where the skin needs the most repair and stimulation. But here comes probably the most powerful point of all. Rosehip oil contains natural compounds derived from vitamin A. And this is extremely important because vitamin A is one of the most studied ingredients in dermatology when we talk about cellular renewal, texture improvement, and the softening of wrinkles and expression lines. That is why so many dermatological treatments use vitamin A derivatives. The difference is that here we achieve a much gentler and more progressive effect, something that is usually much better tolerated by mature or sensitive skin. And there is still another enormous benefit. Rosehip oil is extremely rich in antioxidants. And here many people do not understand something fundamental. Aging does not happen only because of a lack of collagen. It also happens because of the excessive damage the skin receives every single day. And this is where rosehip oil becomes so important, because it helps slow down part of that daily damage that ages the skin without many people even noticing it. In addition, it contains vitamin C and vitamin E, two nutrients that work together and greatly enhance their effects. Vitamin C helps stimulate collagen production, something fundamental for the skin to maintain firmness and elasticity. Meanwhile, vitamin E works like a kind of protective shield, helping defend the cells against wear and premature aging. In other words, it is as if the skin had a protection system constantly working. And so you can better understand how this mixture works, think about it this way. Castor oil helps protect and seal the skin from the outside, while rosehip works more deeply, helping repair and improve the appearance from within. One protects and supports, the other helps rebuild. But here comes a detail that almost nobody mentions. Although rosehip oil is incredibly powerful when used alone, it also cannot deliver the complete effect. And do you know what the problem is? It penetrates the skin very well, yes, but it does not have as much capacity to keep hydration retained for a long time. In other words, it goes deeply in, but part of that effect is lost more quickly than it should be. And that is exactly why we need a third component that works as the connecting point between both oils. Because this ingredient is the one that will balance the entire formula, enhance the results, and make the mixture truly work in a much more complete way. And pay attention, because this is probably the most ignored and underestimated oil of all. Sunflower oil. Yes, I know many people hear that and think, sunflower oil? Seriously? But there is an extremely important detail here that almost nobody knows. Sunflower oil is extremely rich in vitamin E. And vitamin E does not act only as a common antioxidant. It directly helps protect skin cells against premature aging, dryness, and loss of elasticity. But that is not all. Sunflower oil also contains linoleic acid, a component that greatly helps repair and strengthen the skin's natural barrier. And what does that mean in practice? That the skin manages to retain hydration much better, becomes less irritated, and begins to look more balanced, softer, and much more even. And here comes a fact that almost nobody imagines. Sunflower oil is even used in hospitals to help care for bedridden people. Have you seen those lesions or bed sores that appear from staying in bed too long? Well, one of the oils used to help protect and hydrate that skin is sunflower oil. So imagine the level of hydration and protection it can provide to mature and dry skin. But here comes another strategic part of this mixture. Sunflower oil also helps improve the absorption of the other oils, and this detail completely changes the final result because what previously stayed more on the surface begins to penetrate the skin better, and what manages to penetrate can act much more efficiently. So, when you combine the three oils, something very interesting happens. Castor oil helps seal and protect. Rosehip works deeply improving the appearance of the skin from within, and sunflower oil balances the entire mixture, improves absorption, and enhances the effect of the other two ingredients. That is why this stops being simply putting oil on the skin. Here we are creating a complete strategy to care for mature skin. Now, let's move on to the part that interests people the most, how to properly prepare this mixture. Because believe me, this is where many people end up doing everything wrong and then say it did not work. The ideal proportion for mature skin is very simple. 1 part castor oil, 3 parts rosehip oil, and 1 part sunflower oil. How can you prepare it? Very easily. You can use droppers to make it more practical. For example, 1 dropper of castor oil, 3 droppers of rosehip, and 1 dropper of sunflower oil. Mix everything in a small bottle and use that preparation little by little. And when it runs out, you prepare another fresh batch. Now, if you do not want to leave the mixture prepared in a bottle, you can also do it directly in your hand at the moment of application. 1 drop of castor oil, 1 drop of sunflower oil, and 3 drops of rosehip. You can even mix those drops with your nighttime moisturizing cream to enhance the effect even more. Tell me your age and your name in the comments if you have made it this far in the video. And here is another important detail. If your skin is extremely dry, you can increase the amount of castor oil a little to give it more nourishment and protection. But if your skin is oilier or sensitive to heavy textures, you simply reduce the castor oil a little and use approximately half the amount. But now, pay very close attention to this point because this detail can completely change the result you are going to get from the mixture. And honestly, this is where most people ruin everything without realizing it. You are not going to apply these oils by aggressively rubbing the skin. That is a mistake. First, you are going to place the mixture in the palm of your hand. 3 drops of rosehip oil, 1 drop of sunflower oil, and 1 drop of castor oil. Then you gently mix it with your fingers. And before applying it, you do something very important. You warm the oil a little between your hands. Why? Because when the oil reaches a bit of body temperature, the skin absorbs it much better. And this is where the difference begins. Now then, you are not going to drag the product across the skin as if you were applying just any cream. None of that. The application should be done with soft and slow movements, gently pressing the skin, especially on the face or in areas where the skin is thinner and more sensitive. Because when we rub mature skin too much, we can end up marking the lines even more, and promoting sagging. On the other hand, when you apply the oil with gentle pressure and delicate movements, you help the skin absorb the active ingredients better without irritating it. And believe me, this small detail changes the final result tremendously. You can apply this mixture every day on the skin of the arms, especially after showering. And pay attention to this detail because it makes a big difference. Ideally, you should use it while the skin is still slightly damp and warm. And do you know why that is so important? Because after a shower, the pores are more receptive and the skin absorbs the oils much better. It is precisely at that moment when this mixture manages to penetrate more easily and help deeply nourish that arm skin that is normally drier, thinner, and with more sagging, especially on the inner part of the arms, where many people begin to notice that loose, wrinkled, or sagging-looking skin after a certain age. And now you are probably wondering, all right, but when am I going to start noticing real changes? And I am going to answer you with complete honesty. If you are consistent and apply this mixture every day, the first results usually begin to appear much sooner than many people imagine. During the first week, the skin on the arms normally already starts to feel softer, more hydrated, and with a less rough texture. After 3 or 4 weeks, many people notice that the skin begins to look more even, brighter, and less dull. That dry and aged appearance slowly begins to decrease. Between 6 and 8 weeks, it is already quite common to observe improvements in elasticity and the appearance of fine wrinkles and in that mild sagging that makes the skin on the arms look tired. And when the person maintains consistent use for approximately 3 months, that is where the change usually becomes much more evident. The skin begins to look firmer, more nourished, and much more cared for. Even that wrinkled skin or sagging skin appearance begins to soften visually. Do you know those arms with a beautiful, hydrated, and cared for appearance that often seem like the result of expensive treatments? Well, that is exactly the kind of change many people begin to notice with consistent use. But here, I need to tell you something very important. This does not happen overnight, and it is not an instant miracle either. The problem is that many people use a mixture for a few days, quit quickly, or change products before giving the skin enough time to respond. And then they end up believing that nothing works. That is why my advice is simple. Start today and then come back to tell me what the first change was that you noticed in the skin of your arms. And honestly, one of the ways I most like to use this mixture is by placing a few drops inside my body moisturizing cream. Because after the age of 50, the skin on the arms begins to become increasingly dry, thinner, and more sensitive. And for me, this combination is truly worth gold. Share this video on WhatsApp with friends and family members who want to take care of their skin. Discover the miraculous drink you must take to erase wrinkles quickly. Click here. See you in the next video.